Okay, here we go. Got the muzzle installed. Let me just uh, tell you a couple things about it. Um, I used to do it. When I bored the hole for the muzzle. It's a 1-inch bore. I used to do it with a hand drill, portable hand drill, and it's impossible to bore the hole straight. Impossible. So what I've started doing is boring the hole on a floor model drill press. That way you get a nice straight hole. You can bore it 1 inch. It fits nice and snug that way. But what I was doing before that was doing it with the hand drill. I would do it with an 1 1/8 bit. That way you had some play in here to level the muzzle out with the spear. And let me show you the way I install the muzzle. Is I actually once I get the hole bored out, I actually put the spear in the guide, and then I epoxy all my muzzles in. I just feel safer that way. I feel it takes up any of the space in there, and you're not going to ever have to replace this muzzle. I mean, these things are bulletproof. They're indestructible. If you do wear out the pulleys on it, they're available. MVD sells the kit to the repair kit with the rollers, or you can get them online. But the way I do this is I lay the spear in after I bore the hole out, epoxy it. On the back of the muzzle, you'll see there's a hole on the back of the muzzle. I fill that hole with epoxy, and I take the O-ring off. Don't use the O-ring, and I fill the hole, the groove where the O-ring was, and then I put. I try to get the whole board as close to 1 inch as I can. I bore it usually about inch, 1 1/8. So you have to take up that space with epoxy in the back. What I'm getting at is you don't want to put so much epoxy in here to when you put the muzzle in, you have epoxy oozing out around the muzzle. It's a pain. It's a pain to clean up. It's almost impossible to get it all out. It looks unsightly. So just put enough in there to epoxy the muzzle in. You don't want it squeezing out around the muzzle. So what I do is if you bore it to the 1 1/8, or if you have a floor stand drill press, you can bore it 1 inch. It fits nice and snug 1 inch. If you do it 1 1/8 or the 1 inch, regardless, once you lay your shaft in here, I know this gun shoots perfect. I build all my shafts. I know this gun shoots perfect with a 32-inch, 1/4 inch shaft. So, and I've tried every size, every color, every dimension of shaft, and this 32.5-inch gun shoots perfect with a 1/4 inch by 36-inch shaft. So once you get the muzzle epoxied, put the muzzle in, and then set your shaft in the groove here, and line everything up. Get it all lined up to where the muzzle's even with the shaft both ways. The muzzle's, you definitely don't want the muzzle too high to where it lifts the shaft up off of the runner here. If anything, you want it a little low. But if you get it too high, you can always come in and grind this out. But put the muzzle in, and then line everything up nice and perfect, and then just put some blue masking tape around everything. I put it around the shaft in the gun, and around the shaft and the muzzle, and then that way everything stays lined up while the epoxy sets on it, and it works out perfect that way. So that's how you get your muzzle set. And then I'm going to go ahead and show you how I set my trigger. It's real easy to do. And back to the muzzle. Let me finish up on the muzzle real quick. After you epoxy the muzzle in, let it set. I make my own 1/4 inch stainless steel pins. They're easy to do. You can make them out of 1/4 inch bolts. I buy stainless steel 1/4 inch rod. I make my shafts with it, and I always have spares. So a little taper on each end of the pin, so it goes through nice and straight. And what I do, the muzzle end piece, the bore piece, is 1 inch. I go back a 1/2 inch and drill straight through and I make my pins just short of the width of the gun. That way when you put the pin in, it's just barely recessed. It looks nicer that way. So this is where your strength is. It's not going to be in epoxy in the, you don't want to just, rely on the epoxied in muzzle. It's probably not going to work. As much pull as on this at one time. So 1/4 inch stainless steel pin your muzzles in, and that should secure that muzzle from now on. And let's go to setting the trigger now. This is, the Neptonics triggers. They're excellent triggers. I've used several of them, and this is the gauge that they sell with it. Perfect jig. It works perfect with it. But the way I have figured out on this is, if you go by their instructions online, if you follow their instructions online, what they tell you to do is set the trigger mechanism into the gun and flush, and put your gauge in to where it's flush with the gun. Well, that's fine if you're building a enclosed track. It sets the trigger mechanism deep enough for an enclosed track, If you're not building an enclosed track, if you're doing what I call a semi-enclosed or a top rail gun, to where the shaft is up on top of the wood, setting the trigger mechanism like they show you in their instructions not going to work. It's going to set it too deep. The shaft is going to go either over the top of the trigger mechanism. It's just not going to work. So the way I figured out to do, and it works out perfect for me, it might be wrong, I don't know, but it works out perfect for me. What I do is I actually take the shaft that I'm going to use on the gun, which I know this one works perfect with 1/4 inch or 6mm shafts, and that's, they're so close, they both work the same. But what you want to do is whatever you're comfortable using in your gun. If you want to use a 5/16 shaft or a 7mm shaft, that's fine. The way it works is, what you want to do is go ahead and whatever shaft you're going to use, put the shaft in. Go ahead and install the shaft in the trigger mechanism till it locks in tight, and then put the trigger mechanism in the slot here. Go ahead and put it down in all the way until you get it to where the shaft is, everything's nice and straight, as if you were done with the gun. Everything's nice and level. Check it to make sure that everything's right. That's working free. Run it in and out a couple times, lock it in, and know that this shaft is now set at the right. The trigger mechanism now is set at the right, perfect height for this shaft. And just say you were to use, just say you're comfortable shooting a 5/16 shaft, set it with your 5/16 shaft, and any size shaft under that size will work. You can use any shaft under the shaft size that you set this trigger mechanism with. And once you get this all in here and you're comfortable with it and everything's nice and level, you want to make sure you get everything nice and level as far as front to rear. Even if you take a nice, steel rule and measure it, or if you want to level the gun and then put a level on top of the trigger mechanism, you can do it that way. It's easy just to use a nice steel rule and get it nice and level, get the trigger mechanism front to rear nice and level. And then I put the jig on, and they tell you to line up the jig with the front of the trigger mechanism perfectly, and then I come in with just a nice hand clamp, or you can use a C clamp. The only problem with C clamps at this point is you want to put something against the wood to keep it from gouging your wood up. So these work out perfect, and then just put a nice clamp on it, and everything's set right, and then you can turn it on its side, come in and drill your pinholes for your trigger mechanism, and you're ready to go. And like I say, it's just up to you whatever size shaft you want to use them, but do take in consideration that whatever size shaft you use, large or small. If you use a 5/16 shaft or 3/8 shaft, this mechanism will take either one, all of them. that whatever shaft you set, the size shaft you set your trigger mechanism for, it will shoot. You can install any shaft under the size that you set it up with. So that's a good point. And like I say, you know, work it a couple times, make sure that everything's going to work fine on it, which this one does. You know, everything locks in perfect. You know, if you pull the trigger, you can see that it's releasing, so everything's nice and smooth. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and drill, since I'm sure you know how to drill, I'm going to go ahead and drill the trigger mechanism and get it installed, and we'll go from there. And I'll be back, and give me 2 or 3 minutes and I'll get that done and be right back.